Hello there guys, welcome back to Younes Talks Football, welcome back to a brand new video. I hope all of you are doing well. We have another collab today. So, last time we had Louis Beneventi, someone that we know very well, and today we've got another prodigy here, SonOfChelsea, Daniel, mate.
It's great to be on, great to collab again. I feel like we always have great discussions when we talk about Chelsea, and just want to go on a quick tangent. I think, you're sort of partly responsible for my return to YouTube, whether that's positive or negative, depending on what your thoughts on my channel are. But we had that discussion, I think it was when Sarri was still manager, and that was a big sort of motivation for me to sort of come back to YouTube and sort of what I'm doing now. So I've got to thank you for that, and thanks for being a good mate, man. It's always great to chat about Chelsea.
Hey, no problem, man. No worries. Well, I mean, I didn't think of it like that, but yeah, man, if that's what it took for you to come back, then great. You're smashing it. I mean, everyone that knows Daniel, that knows SonOfChelsea, great. If you don't, honestly, I'd say one of the best channels out there. No ranting, no hyperbole, as you've put it on your channel header. no madness, just proper analysis, proper level-headed, cool, calm, composed content. And yeah, we go back, man. We go back. We've known each other for a while. So you're on 17k at the moment. Make sure you go into the description and sub to him. Let's try and get him to 20. We can do it. Give him the support that you've given me, and brilliant to have you on, mate. Firstly, how are you?
I'm doing good. I think it's been quite an intense season, hasn't it? I think in terms of the amount of games, I'm happy we're getting into that stage of the season where you get to the last international break and you're sort of looking towards now the bulk of the season. This is where it gets serious, basically. You've had the opening months of the season and you have to sort of break every now and then for these international breaks. But we're really going to learn a lot about this Chelsea side in these next period of games, because it's going to get intense. There's going to be some big games coming up for Frank Lampard's team. But I think that overall it's great currently, if talking outside of football. I think it's great that in the current situation of the UK lockdown, we still have football to talk about, which unfortunately in the first lockdown we didn't have. So, for my channel, for your channel, for football fans, it's great that we still have football on, which I think is a big help to a lot of people.
I mean, I hope it remains that way, because the first lockdown was a flipping disaster, and this lockdown is hard in itself, and it's harder in other circumstances, but at least we've got football. At least now, with the international break coming to an end finally, right, and we're not going to have another one then till March. I mean, it makes me so happy to say that, right? But we've got a lot of Chelsea coming up, and a lot of Premier League, and a lot of domestic competition, and Champions League, and all of that. First and foremost, let's get into it. In terms of our season so far, prior to this international break, what have been your overall thoughts? How have you assessed us? How do you think we're doing? Are you happy with the direction we're going in?
I think you've got to be pleased with at least the recent run of form that we've seen from Chelsea. And I think majorly the improvement defensively, I think, is the big thing we've seen so far this season with the new additions coming in. I think it was a bit of a rocky start, but I think, I have Dan McCarthy on my channel, and if you're not following him on Twitter, he's a great guy. And he coaches in America. He was a former professional as well, so he knows a lot about this stuff. And he was talking about how important preseason is, and I think that's something that's been undervalued this season. And it was something I sort of spoke about before the season started, but I don't think many of us appreciated how big of a contributing factor that was to how sluggish and maybe disconnected we looked in the opening period of this season. And then once you started to see that those players, playing more together, the more games we got, the better fitness sort of improving over a period of time, Chelsea then improved and we looked better. So I think there needs to be that appreciation, because there was some frustration early on with some of the performances that were, concerning at points. The Southampton game is probably the best example. But you look at the Southampton game and then you look at the contrast to the Sheffield United game, or, just games recently, Chelsea look a lot more impressive. We look a lot more cohesive. I think that Sheffield United game was such a great sort of way to end that period before we went into this international break, because I think it shows the improvement defensively, but also expressively going forward. I mean, we just look so exhilarating to watch, and hopefully that will be a sign of things to come under Lampard.
Yeah, fingers crossed, man. Fingers crossed. I mean, it's been a very, very good end to our, this portion of the season before the international break. I completely agree. That balance was key, wasn't it? because we started to get a little bit hesitant in the fact that maybe we're not finding balance. But you made a good point in regards to pre-season, and I did think of that. But the truth of the matter is, I think there's two sides to that. There's one side of it applies to everyone. We're all in the same boat. It's not just Chelsea. Others haven't had pre-season as well, so we're all on the same level playing field. However, when you flip it, no one has had as many signings as us. And if you're trying to incorporate that many players at the same time, whereas other teams already have players playing together from last season, it's a kind of a different situation. So yeah, I can completely get that. In regards to the new signings though, and to be honest, we're gonna talk about some of the players that were already at Chelsea as well. But which ones do you think have had the most influence so far? Which ones have come in, whether they're new or from last season or existing, do you reckon have had the biggest impact on our season so far?
I think Ben Chilwell was the first name that comes to mind. I think he's been the best of the new signings. I think in terms of consistency of performance, I think he's been exceptional. He really has. He's just fitted in so perfectly to Chelsea. I, for months, was talking about how important left back for me was this summer, and why for me it was like a priority position for Chelsea to strengthen. I felt that Ben Chilwell would improve us in that area because we've been lacking something in that area for quite a while, and sort of revamping it and modernising it. But I didn't quite appreciate how good Chilwell would be defensively as well. I mean, he's looked exceptional too. I think Chilwell just is adding everything we sort of dreamed he would in that area. Apart from that, I think, Thiago Silva's been sort of the leader we'd hoped he would be. I think the one thing we lacked last year was a leader. It's a very simple thing to say, but danger awareness. It feels like we have not prime JT back, but 14, 15 JT back. That's the way I feel when I'm watching Thiago Silva at the moment. And you see the influence he's having on, say, Kurt Zouma and Ben Chilwell, and Edouard Mendy's been brilliant as well. I think it was interesting. I did a poll on my Twitter before the Sheffield United game, I think it was, and I said, who's your favourite player or the best player so far this season? And it was basically the back four I picked. I think with the exception, I don't know if I put Zuma in there, but basically all defensive players, and I think that says about sort of the key improvement. You can't sniff at what Timo Werner's done so far this season. He hasn't been as sort of exhilarating, with the exception of that Southampton game where he scored 2 goals. But he's scoring goals consistently. He's putting the ball in the back of the net at a pretty impressive rate. And to think, in my opinion, he isn't at full flow yet, but he's still scoring a lot of goals, I think that's a great thing for a striker. Kai's had a little bit of a slower start, but he's shown some good moments. Ziyech really came to the fore against Sheffield United, didn't he? I mean, that was a dream performance from him, and I think it shows you how impressive he's going to be as sort of the creative hub of this team. But there's been so many players I could pick out. I think in terms of the new signings, they've all added their elements to the team. I think some more than others. I think a player like Kai, if you look at the history of his career, has always come good at the later part of the season. So I think, and as well, you've got to appreciate how young of a player he still is, just because we spent a lot of money on him. But Timo, I think Ben, I think Mendy has looked impressive too. Thiago Silva, I think, and I also think, as I'm sure you'll come to, how it's elevated the games of players who were at the club last season as well, that I think is really encouraging too.
You mentioned one player there that I do want to focus on. I mean, everyone else you've said is spot on. It's spot on. But there's one player which hasn't really, I don't want to say hasn't shown his potential, but I don't think he's been given. He doesn't have the opportunity to really, establish himself yet, because he's come in, he's played some games, he's done well, he's got a couple of assists, and that's all lovely. He's even scored one. And then he's been out, and then he got tested positive, and it's just been a little bit of a hectic situation. Kai Havertz, now he's going to come back, right? After this international break, we're going to expect him to be back in the team. What do you expect from him? Because everyone else looks like they've established themselves now. Kai Havertz is the last remaining one, and I have full faith in what he's going to do. But what do you see coming from Kai Havertz the moment he steps back in and he starts playing a consistent amount of games?
Yeah, I think the shame of it with the timing, I mean, there was never a good time for him to test positive for COVID, right? But in terms of, it came after that Burnley performance where that 4-3-3 with him and Mason as the 2-8s playing together, and you wanted to see that again, but unfortunately Frank couldn't do that because he wasn't available for the Rennes or Sheffield United game. So I think you need to take that into context as well. Once I see Mason, Kai and Kante as the midfield three for a consistent run of games, I think then you can make a better judgment. I think it's been difficult for Kai because he's played some games, like he started the season out wide. He played one game as a sort of a false nine. He played a lot of games when the 4-2-3-1 seemed to be the main formation Frank was opting for as that number 10. He shifted it again, so now it looks like he's going to have a little bit more help up in that area of the pitch. So it isn't going to be so reliant on him. I think he's going to have Mason to help him out as well, which I think is good. I think the comparison between the nature of this signing in terms of Kai Havertz, I think you can make a lot of comparisons to when we signed Eden Hazard at basically the same age. And it's a long-term investment, Kai Havertz. This is not a player who's in the prime of his career. We are hoping he's going to have a similar impact that Eden Hazard did, right? And think about Eden Hazard's first season at Chelsea. It wasn't exhilarating. There were some brilliant moments within there, but we didn't really see the real Eden Hazard till about the second season when Mourinho returned. And I think you'll see similar with Kai Havertz. And I don't think that's a negative. I think there's so much expectation on Kai. He's got so much left to grow and develop. And I think that with the players around him, I think you'll see flourishes. And I think there also needs to be a consideration for the type of player he is in comparison to other sort of players we've built recently. He's not a very sort of dominant player in the sense that he's much more of an introverted sort of, his demeanor is quite casual. And I do wonder sometimes if the English sort of fan sort of mentality or perception of a player like that is he's not being very sort of dominant on the pitch when he actually is. When, look at the stats of some of his games recently, been really impressive. So I just think it's about being patient with Kai. I think he's got a lot of great players around him that I think will help him get through this first season. But I don't expect him to be like the best player in the Premier League. I think that was always going to be a little bit too far of a step forward, in his very first season at Chelsea in the Premier League.
That's very fair. But fingers crossed, the moment he comes in now and he's playing, as you said, as an 8, because we did rely on him as a 10 for quite a few games. But hopefully with a bit of consistency, we're about to see the real Kai Havertz show up, and combined with everyone else that's already, as I said, establishing themselves and playing really well. Ziyech on his right-hand side. I mean, I'm very, very excited. Let's just put it that way. But, okay, if we had to predict, right, Chelsea's end of season, where do you think we're going to come in the league? Domestically, Champions League? If you had to make a prediction, how's it all going to end?
I'm not going to veer away from my pre-season prediction, which was third place. I still think that should be the aim for Chelsea. I know that the way the Premier League has unfolded so far has, I think, led people to believe the league is very open. I want to be cautious about that because the next 10 Premier League games for me is going to be defining for Chelsea's season, I think, in the way it goes. I think if in 10 games time, so say post-Christmas, Chelsea are like top of the league or we're second, right? Then I think we can all turn around and go, okay, we're probably in a title race here. This is going to be a serious sort of title charge. It's a big 10 games for Chelsea. They're going to face a lot of difficulties in these 10 games and it's going to be very hectic. The questions Chelsea haven't been asked. We've had a good run of games. We've won games consistently, which is great. We've seen that momentum and chemistry, but they're against teams you'd hope Chelsea and expect Chelsea to beat pretty comfortably. Been a bit of concern in the recent games. The last 2 Premier League wins came against teams who hadn't won a Premier League game before facing us and were in the bottom 3 when they faced us. So there's got to be that consideration as well. I think third place because I want to see progression from last year. If third place means we're like 6 or 7 points behind the eventual Premier League champions, that's a positive for me in terms of progression from last season, right? I still think this is a very long season and I think fatigue is going to play a massive part for smaller squads as the season goes on. So the likes of Aston Villa, Everton, Southampton may start to struggle as the season goes on. I think this period of games is going to really, start to show that. So I still believe Liverpool and Man City are going to be in that top 3 and probably still ahead of us based on my preseason expectations. So I think third is good. If anything above that, brilliant, right? Champions League, I think Chelsea got to be aiming for the quarterfinals this year. I think we should be winning our group. I think hopefully by the time we face Sevilla away from home, that's probably going to be a defining match of who gets through. The way the group is sort of going at the moment in terms of Chelsea and Sevilla, they're sort of predictably going to be the top 2 teams. Hopefully we'll get a good result there. And then if we get a good round of 16, I mean, Chelsea have not won a knockout Champions League tie since the PSG quarterfinal in 2014 at Denver Bar last minute winner. I couldn't believe it when I read it. I read it a few months back, and I think it shows you, unfortunately, our poor record in the Champions League, and that needs to improve. And once you get into the quarterfinal, Chelsea fans know this more than most. Once you get into the quarterfinal, it's a cup knockout competition. Anything can happen, right? But I think for the squad, I think it'd be massively important to win a knockout tie in the Champions League, even if it's against a team that you'd expect us probably to beat over two legs. I think that would be progression for me. So those are the things. I don't want to veer too far away from what I said in pre-season, because I think I remember, and I want to say this for Chelsea fans, in terms of previous seasons, just to warn them, we've had harsh winters the previous 2 or 3 seasons under Conte and Sarri and Lampard last year. We were sitting very pretty and strong at the last November international break last year. If you remember right, we were on a good run of form. And then winter hit and our form deteriorated and we were in a Champions League scrap for the qualification by the end of the season. I hope that won't be the case this year. I just think it's good to be cautious at the moment and just enjoy the process of what's going on with Lampard at the moment. So those are sort of my long-winded sort of predictions, because I think there's a lot to take into consideration and I don't really want to go too extreme because we still are very early on in the season, to be honest.
That's very fair. And I'll take that. I think you made a very good point in relation to the next 10 games. That is defining. And those games are going to come in thick and fast. Yeah. This December is going to be mental. Game after game after game after game. We've got to play Tottenham. We've got to play Everton. There are some big games in there. And if we get past that, then we can really, really start getting excited. But we're positive. We know that we have what it takes. And fingers crossed we get to somewhere big. Dan, it's been brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on. First and foremost, I want to let you know you are killing it on your channel at the moment.
Thank you, man.
Brilliant stuff. For those of you watching, if you're not subscribed to him already, link is in the description. Son of Chelsea, constant Chelsea content, and at such a high level at the moment, you're smashing it. So well done and keep going. And for anyone that's new here, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell to be notified once I've uploaded, and smash the like button if you've enjoyed this. Let's try and get this to the target. So thank you all so much. And we will see all of you really, really soon. So Dan, thanks again.
No worries, man. Thanks for having me on.
No problem, mate. And I'll see you very soon. Have a good one. Look after yourselves. Take care and peace.